A struggling street musician's song catches the ear of a billionaire in a single moment. She changes the life of his disabled son and discovers her own path to fame, fortune, and family. The wind in New York City had a sharp bite that afternoon. Golden and brown leaves swirled along the path in Central Park, carried by small gusts that made the branches creak above. Alexander Hartley walked slowly, his gloved hands in the pockets of his expensive wool coat. Beside him, in a sleek wheelchair, was his 10-year-old son, Ethan. The boy was bundled in a navy blue jacket, a knitted scarf wrapped twice around his neck, and a matching hat that almost covered his ears. His cheeks were pale from the cold, but his dark eyes, usually quiet and tired, watched the path ahead without much interest. Alexander adjusted his pace so he wouldn't get too far ahead. He had long legs, and in his fast-moving business life, he was used to walking quickly, striding into meetings as if the world itself had to keep up with him. But here in the park with his son, there was no rush. Or maybe there was, just not in the way people usually thought of it. Time felt precious to him now, not because of contracts or deals, but because of Ethan's silence. The boy used to talk, to laugh, to point out the smallest things like a squirrel with a nut or the shapes of clouds. Ever since the accident, since the doctors had confirmed that he would never walk again, something in him had closed up. Alexander had been trying, in his own clumsy way, to open that door again. The park was busy in that quiet, scattered way it often was in late autumn. A jogger ran past them, her breath puffing in little clouds. A man on a bench fed pieces of bagel to a flock of pigeons. Somewhere far off, a dog barked and a child squealed. All the sounds seemed distant, as though the park itself was holding its breath between the seasons. Then faintly, a different sound drifted toward them. It was soft at first, almost swallowed by the wind of guitar string being plucked, followed by a clear, warm voice. Alexander almost didn't notice it. But Ethan's head turned, and his eyes moved in the direction of the sound. Alexander followed, his gaze toward one of the quieter corners of the park, where a few people had gathered in a loose half-circle. There she was. A young woman sat on a small folding stool, a battered acoustic guitar resting on her knee. Her coat looked thin for the weather, the sleeves worn at the cuffs. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulders, and her fingers moved across the strings with a natural, practiced grace. She was singing not loudly, not like a performer trying to fill a stadium, but softly, as if the song was meant for each person listening alone. Alexander felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down. Ethan's hand was there, his mittened fingers gripping lightly, his eyes still on the musician. It wasn't much, but it was more reaction than Alexander had seen from him in days. Without a word, he pushed the wheelchair off the main path and toward the small crowd. The ground was a little bumpy, the fallen leaves crackling under the wheels. But Ethan didn't complain. As they got closer, the sound became clearer. The woman's voice was warm and textured, carrying an emotion that was hard to describe something between longing and hope. The melody was simple, but it seemed to wrap around the air like a blanket. Alexander found himself slowing down, not just because of the crowd, but because he wanted to hear more. Ethan's eyes were fixed on her now, and there was something different in them, something Alexander had missed for so long. It wasn't just interest, it was a kind of light. For months, Ethan's gaze had been dim, as though the world had lost its color. Now, faintly, it was as if a window had been opened. The woman's guitar had scratches and small chips in the wood, the kind that spoke of years of use. Her fingers, though thin, were strong and quick, moving across the strings with a confidence that only came from countless hours of practice. She closed her eyes as she sang, as if the park, the people, even the cold, had disappeared. And all that remained was the music. Alexander glanced at his son. The corners of Ethan's mouth were curling upward just slightly, but unmistakably. A smile, a real one. It had been months since he'd seen it. Alexander felt a strange tightness in his throat. He wasn't the type to get emotional in public. He was known for keeping a steady, controlled expression even in the most tense business negotiations. But now, looking at that smile, he had to look away for a moment. The song reached its soft, lingering end. There was a small round of applause. From the crowd, the woman smiled shyly, nodding in thanks, and began strumming a new tune. This one was lighter, almost playful. A few children who had been passing by stopped to listen, their parents hovering nearby. One little girl started swaying to the rhythm, her red mittens waving in the air. Ethan's smile widened, and Alexander swore he saw his son's foot twitch. Slightly, as if remembering the old habit of tapping to the beat, for the next few minutes Alexander forgot about the cold. He forgot about the emails waiting for him, the calls he had postponed. He even forgot, in a way, about the weight he'd been carrying since Ethan's accident. The music seemed to lift it just a little, as if sharing it between everyone standing. There, when the second song ended, Alexander waited for the applause to fade before leaning down slightly toward his son. "Do you want to stay for one more?" he asked quietly. Ethan nodded without hesitation. That was all Alexander needed. He stayed. They listened. The woman played a slow, haunting ballad this time, her voice trembling in certain notes in a way that felt intentional. Like the cracks in the sound made it more human. It was in that moment, watching his son's rapt expression, hearing this stranger's voice, that Alexander felt something shift. He had seen talent before. He had invested in young entrepreneurs, in artists, in people with ideas that could change industries. But this was different. This wasn't about markets or returns. This was about something deeply personal. When the final chord faded, the woman opened her eyes, blinking, as if waking from a dream. The crowd clapped again, and a few people tossed bills and coins into the open guitar case at her feet. She smiled, murmured a soft thank you, and began adjusting her guitar strap. Alexander straightened, still looking at her. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew two things for certain. First, her music had just given his son something he hadn't seen in months: joy. Second, he wasn't going to walk away without speaking to her. As the small crowd began to thin, he pushed Ethan's wheelchair closer, the crunch of leaves marking their approach. The woman looked up, her gaze meeting Alexander's for just a moment before flicking to the boy in the wheelchair. Her smile softened. And that was where something began, not just a conversation, but a chain of events none of them could have imagined. A week had passed since Alexander and Ethan met Mia in the park. The cold had deepened, and the city streets were dressed with early holiday decorations, twinkling lights wrapped around lampposts, shop windows filled with wreaths and ribbons. Alexander had been busy with his work, moving between meetings, negotiations, and endless phone calls. But no matter how tightly his schedule was packed, the memory of that afternoon in the park stayed with him. He remembered Ethan's smile most. Of all, it had been small, almost shy, but it was real. And it had come from a song, from a voice belonging to a stranger who had nothing to do with their lives, at least not until now. That night, after the park, he had done something unusual for him. He had sat at his desk and thought not about profits or investments, but about possibilities. He had even gone so far as to look up small recording studios in the city. He wasn't sure why, but the idea of helping Mia had rooted itself in his mind. Maybe it was gratitude. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was because he had spent years surrounded by people who chased wealth. Yet here was someone who chased music, even when it left her cold and broke. So when he decided to invite her to his home, it wasn't an impulsive move. It was planned, though not in his usual calculated, business-minded way. This time, the plan was simple. He wanted Ethan to hear her music again. He wanted to see if the feeling from the park could be brought into their home. It took him 3 days to track her down. She didn't have a website, a social media page, or a number listed anywhere. In the end, he had to send one of his assistants to visit the park during the afternoons until they found her again. She was right where she had been before, same stool, same worn guitar, playing as the cold wind swept through. When she received the invitation, Mia was surprised. People sometimes stopped to compliment her, and occasionally someone asked for a song at a private party or a small event. But she had never been invited to a place like his. At first, she thought about saying no. She didn't know much about him, other than the fact that he had an expensive coat and a quiet, commanding presence. But then she remembered Ethan. The way he had listened to her, the way he had smiled it, had stayed with her just as much as her music had stayed with him. She found herself saying yes. On the evening of the invitation, she stood outside a tall glass building in Manhattan, her guitar case slung over her shoulder. She looked at the glowing lobby, at the uniformed doorman who waited inside, and felt a flicker of doubt. She wasn't dressed for this world. Her coat was secondhand, her boots scuffed, and her gloves had the same holes in them. But she straightened her shoulders and walked in. The doorman greeted her politely, as if expecting her. "Miss Rivera, Mr. Hartley is waiting for you," he said, pressing a button for the private elevator. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she stepped into a space that looked like something from a magazine. Its florid ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline. The living room was wide and warm, with soft lighting and shelves filled with books. But the first thing she noticed wasn't the luxury, it was Ethan, sitting in his wheelchair near a large window, small smile already forming when he saw her. "You came," he said quietly. "Of course I did," she replied, smiling back. "I told you I'd play for you again." Alexander entered the room, dressed in a dark sweater instead of his usual suit. He greeted her politely and gestured toward a comfortable chair near Ethan. "Thank you for coming, Mia. We really appreciate it." Mia set down her guitar case and began to play. At first, the sound was the same as it had been in the park soft, intimate, wrapping around the room like a warm blanket. But here, in the quiet of the penthouse, the music felt even more personal. Ethan listened with his whole body, leaning slightly forward, his eyes fixed on her hands. Alexander stood back, watching them. He noticed the way Ethan's expression shifted with each song, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes amused, sometimes almost wistful. He noticed the way Mia spoke between songs, telling small stories about where she had learned them or why she had written them. She was a natural storyteller, her words as gentle and unforced as her melodies. After 3 songs, she set the guitar aside for a moment. "Do you play any instruments, Ethan?" she asked. "I used to play a little piano," he admitted, "but I stopped." "Why?" He hesitated. It didn't feel the same anymore. Mia nodded, as if she understood without him having to explain. "Sometimes, when something hurts, even the things we love feel different. But sometimes they can feel like home again, if we let them." There was a brief silence. Then Ethan asked, "Can you teach me guitar?" Mia's eyes flickered toward Alexander. She wasn't sure if it was her place to say yes. But Alexander stepped forward, his voice calm. "Actually, that's something I was hoping we could talk about." He sat down across from her. "Mia," he began, "I know you've had a tough time. I also know you're an incredible musician. What you did for my son in the park, what you're doing right now, it matters. And I'd like to make you an offer." She looked wary. "What kind of offer?" "I'll fund your music career," he said plainly. "Studio time marketing. Recording everything you need to make an album and get it out into the world. In return, I'd like you to spend the next 6 months working with Ethan as his personal music mentor. Teach him guitar, maybe help him find joy in music again." Mia blinked, caught off guard. "Talent?" It sounded too big, too generous to be real. You'd do that? For me?" "Yes," Alexander replied simply. "For both of you. I think you could help each other." She sat back, unsure what to say. She had dreamed of recording her music for years, but every time she thought about it, she saw the walls, money, resources, connections, and now suddenly this man was offering to tear all of them down. But another thought rose in her mind. What if this was a trap? What if it came with strings she couldn't see yet? She didn't know him well enough to trust him completely. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "It's a lot to take in." Alexander nodded. "I understand. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Think about it. If you say yes, we'll draw up a simple agreement, fair terms. No tricks. And if you say no, we'll still be grateful for the music you've shared with us." The conversation eased after that, and Mia played a few more songs before leaving. She stepped back into the cold night air, the city lights glittering around her. She felt torn. Part of her wanted to run from the offer because it felt dangerous to hope for something so big. But another part of her, the part that had been singing in the streets for years, was already imagining what it would feel like to stand in a real recording studio and bring her songs to life. And somewhere deep down, thinking about herself anymore. She was thinking about a boy in a wheelchair who had smiled at her music like it was the first sunrise he'd seen in a long time. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Mia. At first, the world she had stepped into felt almost unreal. She was still the same woman who had played for coins on park benches. Yet now, she was being handed opportunities she had never dared imagine. Studio sessions, meetings with producers, even a small public performance, arranged by Alexander, who moved through his life with quiet authority, but never once pressured her. Ethan, too, was adjusting. The boy who had rarely left his home, except for therapy sessions, was now buzzing with excitement each time Mia arrived. She had begun teaching him the basics of guitar, how to hold it, how to strum, how to feel the music in his fingers. At first, progress was slow. His hands were unsteady, and sometimes frustration would flare in his eyes. But Mia had patience. She encouraged him with gentle smiles and reminders that music was meant to be felt, not rushed. Alexander watched them, together more than he probably should have admitted. There was something profoundly moving in seeing a child discover joy again. And even more so when that joy was sparked by someone like me. Someone who had faced hardship herself yet gave so freely of her talent and warmth. He often thought about the day he had first met her in the park. The memory felt like a gift he hadn't realized he needed, a moment that had quietly shifted his life as much as it had shifted Ethan's. Soon, their lessons became a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Mia would arrive with her guitar, and they would spend hours in the music room Alexander had arranged in a quiet wing of the house. Ethan started to look forward to these lessons as if they were little adventures, and slowly his confidence began to grow. He learned simple chords, then small melodies, and eventually short songs he could play on his own. The joy on his face when he hit the right note was infectious. Mia found herself smiling more than she had in years, and Alexander felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced since Ethan was born. Meanwhile, Mia's music career began to take shape. Alexander introduced her to producers, arranged recording sessions, and even helped her write songs that would appeal to a wider audience. Without compromising her authentic voice, she was learning new things about herself, how to perform under pressure, how to channel her life experiences into lyrics, and how to take the raw, heartfelt songs she had been singing in parks and turn them into polished tracks that could reach millions. Despite all the changes, Mia remained humble. She never forgot the streets she had played on, the cold nights, the long hours spent dreaming while the city ignored her. Those memories gave her music depth and soul. Alexander noticed this immediately. Unlike some artists he had supported in the past, Mia's heart was in her music, and it showed. Every song carried emotion, every chord resonated with truth. One evening, after a particularly long session, Ethan strummed a melody he had been practicing. It was simple, yet it had a charm that made Mia pause. "That's beautiful, Ethan," she said softly. "Really improving." Ethan beamed. "I want to play a song for Mom one day," he said, his voice full of determination. "I want her to hear me play and smile like I do when you play for me." Mia's heart melted. She knew exactly what he meant. Music had a way of speaking. The things that words couldn't, a way of connecting hearts across distances and difficulties. And here was Ethan, learning that language with her guidance. Alexander, listening quietly from the corner of the room, felt a swell of pride. Not for himself, but for the small, miraculous transformation unfolding before him. Mia was no longer just the street musician he had admired from afar. She was a mentor, a beacon of hope, and a friend to his son. And Ethan, who had often been confined by his limitations, was beginning to understand that life still held wonders worth reaching for, as weeks turned into months. Mia's confidence as a performer grew alongside Ethan's. She started performing in small venues, still humble and approachable, yet her audience began to grow steadily. Alexander supported her fully, but never overshadowed her efforts. He made sure she had what she needed: A quiet studio, professional equipment, connections without ever taking the spotlight from her. Their bond deepened in ways none of them could have anticipated. Mia became like a big sister to Ethan, someone he could rely on not just for music lessons, but for guidance, laughter, and companionship. Alexander found in her presence a quiet stability, someone who reminded him of life beyond spreadsheets and boardrooms. One rainy afternoon, after a lesson that had gone particularly well, Mia and Ethan were sitting by the window, sharing a cup of hot chocolate. Ethan strummed a simple melody softly, humming along. "Do you think I'll ever be good enough to play in front of people?" he asked, his eyes full of curiosity and hope. Mia smiled warmly. "You're already good enough, Ethan. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about feeling it, sharing it, and letting it touch others. And you do that beautifully." Ethan leaned back, content. "I like having you teach me. I like music now." Mia's eyes glistened. "I like seeing you play. You've reminded me why I started playing in the first place." Meanwhile, Alexander watched quietly, his mind reflecting on how unpredictable life could be. A chance. Meeting in a park had led to all of this, the blossoming of a boy's confidence, the growth of a talented musician, and a bond that went beyond mere gratitude or generosity. It had become something richer, something profoundly human, as Mia prepared for her first professional recording session. Alexander made sure she had a team she could trust. He sat with her as they reviewed song lists, recording schedules, and promotional plans, but always with a gentle hand, never pressing or controlling. Mia felt supported but independent, balance she had never experienced before. Ethan naturally was thrilled about the studio visits. He accompanied her sometimes, watching the process with wide-eyed fascination. He would ask questions about microphones, sound levels, and instruments, and Mia would patiently explain, sharing her knowledge while keeping it fun. She wanted him to see that music wasn't just a lesson, it was an adventure, a journey of discovery. In time, Mia's music started to attract attention outside Alexander's inner circle. Local radio stations began playing her songs, small articles appeared online, and invitations to perform at community events arrived. Through it all, she remained grounded, never forgetting the park where her journey had unexpectedly intersected with Alexander and Ethan's lives. She still played there occasionally, not for money, but to remember where she came from and to keep her music real. Ethan's progress also became remarkable. He could now play full songs with chords and melodies that were complex for a child. Of his age and abilities, music had given him something far more important than skill. It had given him confidence, purpose, and joy. Alexander often watched from a distance, overwhelmed with gratitude for Mia's patience, dedication, and unwavering kindness. As winter deepened, the three of them settled into a new rhythm. Mia's music career was taking off. Ethan was thriving in his lessons, and Alexander was rediscovering the simple, profound joys of family life through their shared experiences. What had begun as a casual act of kindness in a park had transformed into something far greater, a bond built on trust, respect, and love. Mia realized that life had given her a rare gift, not just an opportunity to share her music with the world, but also a chance to be part of something larger than herself. She could see the difference she was making in Ethan's life, and that sense of purpose was as rewarding as any applause she could ever receive. Alexander, too, learned something invaluable. True wealth, he discovered, wasn't measured in money or material possessions, but in the connections we nurture, in the lives we touch. Watching Mia teach Ethan, listening to the two of them laugh and play music together, he felt a fulfillment that no business deal or investment could ever provide. By the end of the season, Mia had recorded her first professional album. Ethan had learned several complete songs, and their bond had solidified into something permanent. It was no longer just a story of chance or generosity. It had become a testament to what could happen when hearts were open, when talent met opportunity, and when people believed in each other. Through the highs and lows, the struggles and small victories, Mia, Ethan, and Alexander had discovered a truth that transcended wealth and status. The greatest transformations often begin with simple acts of kindness, shared passions, and the courage to believe that life, in all its unpredictability, can still be beautiful. Mia's journey had reached a turning point that she had once only dreamed about. Her first professional album, carefully recorded under Alexander's guidance, was finally complete. Each song carried her story, her struggles, her victories, her hopes and her heartache, but also the joy and warmth she had found in teaching Ethan and being part of his life. Listening to the final mix, she felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. This was her music, polished and ready to be shared with the world, yet it still felt deeply personal. Ethan was sitting beside her, bouncing with excitement. "Mia, it sounds amazing," he exclaimed. "I can't wait for everyone to hear it." His enthusiasm was contagious. For him, Mia's success wasn't just hers. It was a celebration of their journey together, of the bond that had grown over countless lessons, shared laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Alexander, observing them both, felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. He had watched Mia transform from a street musician to a professional artist. Yet he realized that the greatest transformation was happening within his family. Ethan, once a shy and uncertain child, was now confident and happy. Mia's presence had brought warmth and creativity into their lives, and he knew their connection would last far beyond the walls of their home. The day of Mia's first public performance arrived. Alexander had arranged a modest venue, a small, cozy hall with an intimate stage, enough for her closest supporters and a few local media representatives. The room buzzed with anticipation, though Mia felt a familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. Performing had always been daunting, and even with her newfound confidence, she couldn't deny the tension that came with the first live audience. Ethan, seated in the front row, held her hand tightly as she walked onto the stage. His eyes sparkled with pride and encouragement. "You can do this," he whispered, and Mia smiled, drawing strength from his belief in her. She raised her guitar, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes resonated through the hall, soft yet powerful. Mia poured every emotion into her music, the struggles she had endured on the streets, the loneliness she had faced, and the hope she had found in connecting with Ethan and Alexander. The audience listened, captivated by the authenticity in her voice, the passion in her fingers. She could feel their energy, their understanding, their connection, and it filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. As the performance continued, Ethan's face lit up with joy. I clapped, hummed along, and even strummed an imaginary guitar in rhythm. Watching him, Mia felt a wave of gratitude and love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This was more than a concert, it was a celebration of resilience, of second chances, of the beauty that life could bring when hearts were open to it. After the performance, people approached Mia to express their admiration. Local journalists wanted interviews, community organizers invited her to perform at events, and music producers subtly hinted at future opportunities. Mia was thrilled, yet she remained grounded. She remembered the park where she had played for coins, the nights she had gone hungry, and the feeling of being overlooked. Those experiences had shaped her, and she carried them with pride. Her success was not just personal, it was a testament to perseverance and the belief that talent, when nurtured and guided, could transform lives. Alexander quietly guided her through the post-performance interactions, ensuring she felt comfortable yet encouraged. He had always believed in her, but he understood the importance of letting her shine on her own. Watching her navigate this new world with grace and humility, he felt a sense of awe. She was no longer the young woman he had encountered on the park bench. She was a force of nature, capable of inspiring others with her story and her music. Ethan, too, experienced a shift. Seeing Mia perform with confidence and receiving admiration from strangers made him realize the power of courage and determination. He understood that his own journey learning to play the guitar, overcoming his doubts and embracing new experiences, was connected to Mia's story. He had been part of something remarkable, and he felt proud of his role in her life. In the weeks following the performance, Mia's career began to flourish. She was invited to perform at larger venues, her songs started receiving radio play, and her online presence grew steadily. Through it all, she remained humble, always remembering the people who had supported her and the challenges she had faced. Alexander continued to guide her, but he also gave her space to make her own decisions, fostering a sense of independence that was essential for her growth as an artist. Mia's bond with Ethan deepened further. She continued their music lessons, but now they also spent time composing original songs together. Ethan's creativity blossomed, and his confidence soared. He began to dream bigger, perhaps of performing one day, perhaps of writing his own music. Mia encouraged him every step of the way, reinforcing the idea that talent was not just about skill, but about expression, joy, and connection. Alexander observed these moments with quiet pride. He often reflected on the day he had first noticed Mia playing in the park. He had been drawn by her music, but what had captivated him even more was her heart. She had shown kindness, patience, and generosity to a stranger in need, qualities that had now transformed not just his son's life, but his own. He realized that wealth and status were insignificant compared to the richness of human connection and the impact of meaningful relationships. One evening, after a particularly successful recording session, Mia, Ethan, and Alexander sat together in the living room, reflecting on how far they had come. Ethan strummed his guitar softly. Mia hummed along, and Alexander listened, feeling a profound sense of contentment.
Ow.
The journey they had embarked upon, unexpected, challenging, beautiful, had created a family bond that transcended biology. They had shared struggles, celebrated victories, and grown together in ways none of them had anticipated. Mia's story began to reach the wider world. Social media posts, interviews, and articles highlighted her journey from a struggling street musician to a rising star. People were inspired by her resilience, her humility, the way she had used her talent to touch lives, particularly Ethan's. Her story became a reminder that kindness and opportunity, when combined, could create extraordinary outcomes. Despite the recognition and growing fame, Mia never lost sight of what truly mattered. She continued to play for her community, returned to the park where she had first met Alexander and Ethan, and support other struggling musicians. Understood that her journey was not just about personal success, it was about giving back, sharing her knowledge, and inspiring others to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. Ethan, inspired by Mia's example, began to explore his own passions with greater confidence. Music had become a source of joy, creativity, and self-expression for him. He understood that life, while sometimes challenging, could also be filled with beauty, laughter, and meaningful connections. Mia's mentorship had given him not just skills, but courage, hope, and a sense of purpose. Alexander, witnessing all of this, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had initially stepped in to support Mia for the sake of his son, but what had unfolded was far greater than he had imagined. Their lives had intertwined in ways that enriched each of them, bringing love, music, growth, and inspiration into their everyday existence. He realized that the truest form of wealth was measured not in money or possessions, but in the love, joy, and transformation one could create in the lives of others. As Mia's career continued to flourish, she and Alexander worked together to establish a small foundation for aspiring musicians. The foundation provided resources, mentorship, and opportunities for talented individuals who, like Mia, had struggled to find their place. It was their way of paying forward the kindness and opportunity that had transformed their lives, ensuring that others could experience similar breakthroughs. The transformation in Ethan was equally remarkable. He had grown from a shy, uncertain child into a confident, creative, and joyful boy. Music had given him a voice, a sense of accomplishment, and the courage to face challenges. His bond with Mia remained strong, filled with love, trust, and shared passion for the art they both cherished. In time, Mia's story became widely celebrated not for fame or accolades, but for the powerful message it carried. People were moved by how a simple act of kindness could ripple outward, creating profound change in multiple lives. Alexander often reflected on how a chance encounter in a park had led to all of this, marveling at the unpredictable, beautiful ways life could unfold when hearts were open. Mia, now recognized as a talented and compassionate artist, continued to grow both personally and professionally. She maintained the humility and generosity that had defined her from the beginning, using her platform to inspire, uplift, and support others. Her music reached thousands, perhaps millions, but her true fulfillment came from the relationships. She had nurtured the lives she had touched and the joy she had shared with Ethan and Alexander. One quiet evening, as the three of them sat together listening to Mia's latest recording, Ethan strummed along and Alexander hummed a tune softly. The room was filled with warmth, laughter, and love, a testament to the journey they had undertaken. From the streets to the stage, from uncertainty to triumph. They had discovered that life's most meaningful transformations often begin with small acts of courage, kindness, and faith in one another. Looking back, Mia realized that every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this moment. Every struggle, every night spent playing for coins, every doubt and fear had shaped her into the person she had become. And yet, she understood that the greatest gift was not her success, it was the opportunity to create joy, confidence, and hope in the life of another, especially in Ethan. Alexander, witnessing the harmony in their lives, felt a profound peace. What had begun as a simple desire to see his son happy had blossomed into something extraordinary. Life enriched by music, love, and the transformative power of human connection. He knew that Mia and Ethan had changed his life in ways he could never have anticipated, and he cherished every moment of it. And so, their journey continued not as a story of fame or fortune, but as a testament to resilience, compassion, and the magic that can happen when hearts are open, talents are nurtured, and lives intersect in unexpected and beautiful ways. The street musician who had once played for coins had become a beacon of hope. The boy who had struggled with confidence had discovered his voice. And the father who had wished for his son's happiness had witnessed a miracle unfold before his eyes. Together they had created a story of transformation that would echo in their lives forever, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can have the power to change the world. The sound of the guitar still lingered in the air when Alexander and Ethan stopped in front of her. The young woman looked up, her fingers still lightly resting on the strings, as if she might play another note at any moment. She gave a small, polite smile. Up close, Alexander noticed details he hadn't from the crowd, a faint tiredness in her eyes. The way her cheeks were slightly pink from the cold. The way her gloves had holes at the fingertips so she could still play the guitar. Without losing her grip on the strings, "Hi," Alexander said, his deep voice calm but carrying that natural authority that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Your music is beautiful." The woman's smile widened slightly, but her eyes dropped for a second, as if she wasn't quite used to compliments from strangers. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm glad you liked it." "It wasn't just me," Alexander replied, glancing at Ethan. The boy's eyes were still fixed on her, wide and unblinking. "My son hasn't smiled like that in a long time." Woman's gaze softened even more as she looked at Ethan. "Hi there," she said warmly. "I'm Mia." Ethan didn't answer right away, but the corners of his mouth turned upward again. "Hi," he whispered. It was such a small exchange, but to Alexander, it felt like something important had just happened. Mia shifted her guitar on her lap. "Do you want me to play your favorite song?" she asked Ethan. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't have one." "Then I'll have to make you one," she said with a playful wink. She began strumming again, this time a gentle, cheerful tune that wasn't as heavy as her earlier songs. Her voice had a lilt to it now, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. Ethan's eyes followed her fingers, and Alexander stayed silent, letting the moment belong to them. People passed by, some stopping briefly to listen, others hurrying on with their own lives. But in that little bubble of sound and connection, it felt like the rest of the park had faded away. When the song ended, Xander reached into his coat pocket and took out his wallet. Without thinking much about it, he pulled out $100 bill and placed it in her guitar case. Mia's eyes widened slightly. "That's too much," she said quickly. I don't need." "It's not too much," Alexander interrupted gently. "Not for what you just gave him." Mia's mouth opened, as if she wanted to argue, but she closed it again. She seemed unsure whether to say thank you or to explain something, and in the end, she just gave a small nod. Alexander could tell she wasn't the type to accept help easily. There was a quiet pride in the way she held herself, even sitting on that worn stool in a cold park with her guitar case open for change. "Do you play here every day?" Xander asked. "Most days," Mia replied. "Sometimes other spots, too, wherever the police don't mind, really." She gave a small laugh, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "And is this your full-time work?" She hesitated, then nodded. "For now, yeah. I used to do other things. But this is what I'm best at, and it's what I can do." Alexander sensed there was more to that answer. Something about the pause in her voice. The way her fingers absently brushed over the guitar strings even when she wasn't playing, told him there was a whole story there. He crouched slightly so he was closer to her level. "You're very talented, Mia. Have you ever thought about recording your music?" Her eyes flickered with something hope. Maybe, but it disappeared quickly. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "But recording costs money, more than I've got." "You've never tried crowdfunding? Or finding someone to sponsor?" She gave a small shrug. "I don't really have connections. And it's not like people are lining up to help a street musician." She smiled faintly. But it wasn't bitter, more like she'd simply accepted that this was her life for now. Ethan, who had been listening quietly, suddenly asked, "Why don't you just sing for people on the internet? My friend does that." Mia looked at him and chuckled. "I've got an old phone, and it barely records my voice properly. Besides, I like playing in person. You can see people's faces, can feel the air around you change when they listen. Online, it's different." Alexander studied her. There was a sincerity in the way she spoke that he admired. Ouch. She wasn't chasing fame blindly. She just wanted to play music that mattered. After a moment of quiet, Mia looked back at her guitar case. "You don't have to stand here and talk. To me, I'm sure you've got somewhere to be." Alexander almost smiled. People often assumed he was busy because he usually was. Right now, he wasn't in any rush. "I have time," he said simply. They spoke for a little longer, and piece by piece, her story came out. She used to work at a small music store, teaching guitar lessons in the evenings. She even played in a couple of small bars with her own band. But then her mother got sick, really sick, and Mia quit the band to care for her. The medical bills piled up, and the little savings she had vanished quickly when her mother passed away 2 years ago. Mia tried to go back to music, but without the store job or the band, she had nowhere to start. She began playing in the streets to cover her rent and to make sure her younger brother, still in high school, had food on the table. She spoke about him with pride, even though it was clear she carried the weight of his future on her shoulders. "It's not so bad," she said with a shrug, though her hands tightened slightly around her guitar. "I get to do what I love, even if it's out here in the cold, and some days, like today, I get to meet people who actually listen." Alexander listened quietly. In the business world, he met people every day who wanted something from him: money, opportunities, partnerships. Mia didn't ask for anything. She was simply telling her story because he asked, not because she wanted him to fix it. When they finally said goodbye, Alexander pushed Ethan's wheelchair back onto the main path. For a few minutes, they were both silent. Then Ethan spoke, his voice soft but certain. "Dad," he said, "she's different." Alexander glanced down at him. "Different how?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Her music. It's like it's talking to you like it knows how you feel. But she's sad too. I can hear it. Alexander was quiet for a moment longer. You might be right. They kept walking, but Alexander's mind didn't return to the meetings he had scheduled for. Later, or the emails waiting in his inbox. It stayed with Maya, the worn gloves, the old guitar. The way her voice carried both hope and pain at the same time. That night, long after Ethan had gone to bed, Alexander found himself sitting in his study, staring at the city lights outside. His window. He thought about the way his son had smiled, the way Mia had made that happen without even trying. He thought about her story, her talent, the quiet dignity she carried despite her struggles, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain yet, he knew this wasn't the last time he'd see her.